As Mike Tyson drove down the streets to a local diner to get breakfast, he parked his most-precious possessions, a car he'd bought years ago as a reminder of success at the parking lot. As he stepped out, a racist cop saw him, assuming he can't afford that car, approaching him, accusing him of theft. As Mike defends himself of the accusations, the racist cop starts hitting the car with his baton, then lit up a cigarette and toasted into the car, setting it in flames, not knowing he just messed with the wrong person and was about to be taught the lesson of his life. Subscribe and like the video to see how the story uncovers. In the tranquil dawn of this suburban paradise, birdsong greets the sun's rays as they gently coax the neighborhood to life. Within this idyllic scene resides Mike Tyson, a titan of the boxing ring in his heyday, now relishing the peacefulness that comes with retirement. In the early hours, Mike Tyson stirs, his eyes fluttering open to the soft light filtering through the curtains. As he rises, his years of training ingrained in his body, he stretches his arms, a subtle reminder of the power that once dominated the boxing world. Stepping out into his driveway, Mike's gaze falls upon his beloved vintage car, a shining example of his dedication and craftsmanship. The classic black convertible glimmers in the morning light, its body polished to a pristine sheen. Mike runs a hand over the smooth contours of the hood, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. This car, a symbol of his hard-won success, holds a special place in his heart. The vintage engine purrs to life as Mike navigates the streets of the neighborhood, the wheels of his beloved car carrying him toward a local diner for a hearty breakfast. As he arrives, parking his vehicle with a casual finesse, a flicker of recognition crosses the faces of some nearby locals. To some, the legendary boxer is an illustrious figure, a source of inspiration and pride. To others, he remains a stranger in their midst, his presence in the predominantly white neighborhood stirring whispered murmurs of suspicion. Stepping inside the diner, the bell above the door jingles, heralding the arrival of a familiar face. The kind-hearted waitress, a seasoned veteran of the restaurant, spots Mike and lights up with a welcoming smile. Waitress with genuine warmth. "Mike Tyson, what a surprise. How are you, dear?" Mike with a genial chuckle. "Doing just fine, Millie. You still making those pancakes like magic?" Millie, laughing. "You know I am, Mike. Take a seat." As Mike settles into his seat, savoring the aroma of Millie's signature pancakes, a stirring in the parking lot catches his eye. A patrol car, painted in stark black and white, rolls to a halt with an air of foreboding. Out steps Officer Craig, his badge a gleaming reminder of his authority. But it is not his badge that speaks the loudest. Rather, it is the deep-set lines of prejudice on his face and the tension in his gait that betray his true character. As if drawn by some invisible force, Officer Craig's gaze falls upon the vintage car parked in the lot. Its lustrous sheen, a glinting testament to Mike's success, stirs something deep within Craig, a potent blend of envy and rage. Moving with purpose, Craig strides toward the car, his steps filled with a barely contained aggression. In his mind, the narrative of the situation becomes clear. A flashy car in a neighborhood like this must be stolen, and in his eyes the culprit is obvious, the famous black boxer sitting inside. In a slow, deliberate manner, Officer Craig circumnavigates the car, his eyes roaming the gleaming surface like a predator sizing up its prey. Craig, muttering under his breath, his voice laced with contempt, "Who does this nuck think he is, driving around in a car like this? Where'd he steal it from?" His words, a venomous undertone to his inspection, reveal the true nature of his investigation. Officer Craig continues his assessment, each deliberate step stirring the murky depths of his prejudices. "Craig," his voice a low growl. "There's no way someone like him owns a car like this. It must be stolen. These people think they can do whatever they want, strutting around with their fancy things. Not on my watch." With his mind already made up, Craig heads towards the diner's entrance, ready to confront Mike with accusations that, unbeknownst to him, are entirely unfounded. As Mike savors the last bites of Millie's delectable pancakes, he glances out the window, his gaze falling upon the figure of Officer Craig. For a moment, his eyes linger, tracing the officer's movement with a mix of curiosity and caution. But not wanting to succumb to paranoia, he pushes the thought aside, turning his attention to Millie with a casual air. Mike, with a disarming smile, "Those were amazing, Millie. How do you manage to make them so good every time?" As Mike steps out into the early morning light, his casual stride is interrupted by the sight of Officer Craig leaning against his car, twirling his baton with a languid, almost casual air. In that instant, Mike's face hardens. The baton, a symbol of authority, twisted into a display of arrogance, ignites something primal within him. Officer Craig's condescending tone drips with contempt, the mockery in his voice as sharp as a blade. Craig, his voice oozing with sarcasm. "Nice car. You steal it from someone rich, did you? Or did you win it in a rap battle? I know how you people like your hip-hop." Craig smirks, his eyes flickering with satisfaction at his own perceived wit, oblivious to the rising tension emanating from Mike. Mike's tone is terse, his eyes blazing with a restrained fury. His words, though clear and composed, crackle with a barely suppressed rage that threatens to explode. "Mike," his voice tight with indignation, "I didn't steal it, it's mine. Bought and paid for." Craig's smirk falters for a moment, but then his expression hardens, his eyes narrowing into icy slits. Officer Craig's skepticism is steeped in racial bias, his prejudice on full display as he continues his unrelenting assault on Mike's dignity. Craig, sneering with disbelief, "Oh yeah? You expect me to believe that someone like you, a homeless loser, can afford this?" Laughs. "Yeah, right. I've seen more believable fairy tales than that." His mocking laughter echoes around the parking lot, but it does little to mask the sinister edge to his words. Despite the venomous onslaught, Mike's composure holds steady, the flames of anger banked by a discipline forged in the crucible of his past struggles. He produces the registration, a beacon of truth in the face of Craig's bigotry. Mike, his voice neutral, his hand outstretched with the registration. "Here's my registration. See for yourself." But Craig, dismissive of this evidence, snatches the registration from Mike's hand, his eyes blazing with a ferocious dislike. With a flick of his wrist, Craig tosses the registration to the ground, his blatant disregard for the truth seething within him like a volcano on the verge of eruption. "Craig," his voice a torrent of anger, "I don't need to see this. People like you shouldn't even be in this neighborhood. This is a respectable place, not some ghetto." His words, steeped in hatred, are a dangerous combination of ignorance and power, a volatile mix that threatens to tear apart the fragile peace of the scene. The gathering crowd, drawn to the commotion, creates a living ring around the confrontation, their presence an invisible current that amplifies the tension between the two men. Mike, his expression unreadable, stands firm in his resolve to maintain a respectful composure, a pillar of restraint amidst the storm that swirls around him. Mike's measured response, tinged with the request for peaceful resolution, cuts through the rising din of the gathering crowd, a plea for rationality in the midst of chaos. Mike, his tone placating but firm. Mike says, "Officer, I don't want any trouble. Can I just get in my car and leave? I'm not looking to cause any problems." Craig, however, his mind already set on confrontation, rejects the olive branch offered by Mike, a steely glint in his eyes as he takes a step forward. The predatory grin that curls across Craig's lips betrays his intention to inflict as much discomfort as possible, relishing in the power he wields. Craig, his voice dripping with malice. "Not so fast. Let's see how you like a little inconvenience. Maybe you can explain things at the station." As Craig speaks, he reaches for his handcuffs, his movements slow and deliberate, a calculated intimidation tactic designed to cow Mike into submission. The sudden violent crack of the baton against the pristine headlight shatters the fragile peace of the scene. The crowd, stunned into silence, watches in horrified fascination as Craig's aggression reaches a dangerous new level. Like a chain reaction, the onlookers snap to attention, phones held aloft, capturing the unfolding drama for posterity. The silence, a shocked pause, is shattered by a sound that cuts through the air. Mike's voice, tight with rage. A tempestuous frenzy overtakes Officer Craig, the malevolence within him unleashed like a raging storm. Each swing of his baton, each deliberate kick, is an act of calculated destruction. A twisted attempt to vent his bigotry on Mike's beloved car. Craig, growling with unholy glee. "There. Now maybe you'll think twice before you come to this neighborhood again." The crowd, witnessing the senseless violence, begins to stir with anger and disbelief, their murmurs growing in volume as they bear witness to this disturbing display. Mike's plea, a bastion of composure in the face of this senseless attack, belies the simmering fury that burns within Mike, his voice steady but with an underlying edge of steel. "Hey, that's enough. You've made your point. Just stop. Let's be reasonable here." Craig, his baton still clutched tightly in his hand, seemed to hesitate for a moment, the eyes of the crowd boring into him like 1,000 pointed stares. Craig, his voice an unwavering blade of vitriol, rejects the plea for de-escalation with all the contempt of a rabid bigot. Craig, his tone dangerously calm. "No, I don't think I have. You people need to learn your place." The crowd, their anger building, start to shout their protests, but Craig's attention is singularly focused on Mike, his eyes blazing with a manic gleam. "Craig, this is what happens when you don't stay in your lane." With a lazy, almost contemptuous flick of his wrist, Craig flicks the burning cigarette into the car, the embers landing on the pristine upholstery. A tendril of smoke curls upward, a toxic byproduct of his bigotry. "Craig," his voice icy. "There, now maybe you'll think twice about coming back here again." As Craig backs away from the car, the lingering smoke, a mocking reminder of his cruel act, rises toward the clear blue sky like a twisted incense offering. In that instant, the patience that had protected Mike like a shield finally begins to crack. His stance shifts, his composure wavering in the face of the intolerable disrespect he's faced. Mike, his voice low, his jaw tensing. "I've had enough of this. You've gone too far." As he speaks, Mike reaches down, plucking the cigarette from the upholstery with a swift, decisive motion. He grinds the smoldering butt under his shoe, a final act of defiance that signals the imminent breaking point. Mike, the words spilling forth with a slow-burning intensity, holds his ground, his gaze locked onto Craig's. Mike, his voice stern, resolute. "I've tried to be respectful, but now you're crossing a line. You're a bully. You're just here to spread hate. Well, I won't let you do that, not to me, not to anyone." The crowd, emboldened by Mike's determination, grows louder, their cries of protest now a unified chorus. Officer Craig, his twisted grin stretching wider, steps closer, his body language aggressively invading Mike's personal space. The baton, now wielded like a weapon of intimidation, prods Mike in the chest, the metal cold against his. Craig, his voice dripping with contempt. "Oh, what are you going to do about it? You're nothing but a bum, always will be." The smugness in Craig's voice is palpable, a toxic manifestation of his prejudiced beliefs. The growing crowd, now a mass of indignation and righteous fury, swells like a surging tide, their voices a cacophony of disparate cries. Those nearest to Mike shout encouragements, willing him to stand firm in the face of injustice. Meanwhile, others implore him to summon the authorities, a plea to bring order to this unfolding chaos. Mike, standing at the center of this storm, is caught in a crossroads, fight or flee. In a moment of decisive action, Mike surges into motion, his legendary instincts springing to life. His hand, a blur of motion, snatches the baton mid-swing, the metallic clang of metal on metal piercing the air. With a powerful tug, he wrests the weapon from Craig's grasp, the momentum sending it hurtling into the pavement. Craig, caught off guard by Mike's lightning-quick reflexes, stumbles backward, shock painted across his face. In the wake of Mike's heroic feat, the crowd unleashes a roar of approval, their applause and shouts reverberating through the air. But Craig, his pride stung, charges at Mike with reckless abandon, his fists clenched, his eyes narrowed with fury. Yet Mike, fluid as quicksilver, effortlessly sidesteps the attack, his movements calculated and precise. Craig's momentum carries him forward and he nearly stumbles, his frustration mounting with each failed attempt to land a blow. Mike, his voice a measured cadence amidst the chaos, offers a final warning to the incensed Craig. Mike, his tone level, imploring, "You don't want to do this, officer. You're a cop. You're supposed to protect people, not attack them." Craig, his breathing labored, his face flushed with rage, ignores Mike's entreaty, determined to salvage his wounded pride. He circles Mike, a feral hunger in his eyes as he seeks an opening. Craig, driven by his anger, swings his arm with brute force, aiming for Mike's jaw, but in a display of effortless poise, Mike deflects the punch, his blocking technique honed by years of training. The momentary opening is all he needs. With lightning-fast precision, Mike strikes with a light jab to Craig's ribs, a calculated strike that seems almost surgical in its accuracy. The impact sends Craig reeling backward, a sharp gasp escaping his lips. Craig, grunting in pain, "You're going to regret that." Craig, his fury reaching a fever pitch, draws his taser with a flourish, electricity crackling at its tip. The weapon, a threat of incapacitating force, hums in his hand, its purpose now twisted to serve his own vendetta. He fires, a hiss of electricity filling the air as the taser's prongs fly toward Mike, but the former champion's reflexes are like lightning. He leaps to the side, the taser missing him by a hair's breadth. With the deadly weapon rendered useless, Mike pounces, his movement swift and efficient. Craig, caught off guard by Mike's sudden advance, is left defenseless. Mike's hand wraps around Craig's wrist, the force of his grip disarming the officer in an instant. With a decisive move, Mike flips Craig over his shoulder, sending him hurtling to the pavement. The crowd erupts, their cheers like thunderous applause as Mike brings Craig down, his weight pinning the officer to the ground, his hand pressing against the small of Craig's back. Mike, his voice calm and authoritative, addresses the crowd. Their eyes, wide with excitement, lock onto him, hanging on his every word. "Mike," his words carrying across the parking lot, "someone call the real police. This man needs to be dealt with. He's not worthy of that uniform." The crowd, galvanized by Mike's call to action, rushes to heed his words, their phones lighting up as they dial 911. Craig, pinned beneath Mike's weight, thrashes in desperation, his voice hoarse with anger. His words, a string of expletives and insults, are a futile attempt to mask his powerlessness, a stark contrast to the authority he had wielded only moments ago. Craig spitting out his words like venom. "Let me go, you damn nuck! You don't know who you're messing with?" Mike, unmoved by Craig's vitriol, leans in closer, his gaze piercing through Craig's facade of bravado. As the tumult of the scene unfolds, a commanding voice slices through the fray. "Police chief," his tone brimming with authority. "Step away from him, Mr. Tyson. Let me handle this." The chief, flanked by a squad of officers, surveys the scene with a stern, disapproving gaze. In his hand, a tablet displays the damning footage of Craig's abuse of power, a testament to the corrupt officer's crimes. As the chief strides toward Craig, handcuffs in hand, the full weight of the law descends upon the disgraced officer. Handcuffs click into place with a satisfying snap, signaling the end of Craig's reign of terror. As the disgraced officer is hauled to his feet, his head hangs low, the cold metal restraints a fitting symbol of his downfall. Craig, once a symbol of authority, is now reduced to a shell of his former self. Humiliation and defeat weigh heavily on his shoulders, his disgraced state a cautionary tale for those who would abuse their power. The crowd, emboldened by the justice unfolding before them, lets out a cheer, their collective voice an exultant chorus of triumph. "Chief," his expression solemn, his voice laced with genuine contrition. "Mr. Tyson, I deeply apologize for this officer's behavior. It is unconscionable and a disgrace to the badge he wears. Rest assured he will be held accountable for his actions." The chief, standing as a beacon of integrity and honesty, extends a hand toward Mike, an offering of solidarity against the injustice they've both witnessed. "Chief," his voice solemn but firm, "officers like him have no place in our ranks." Mike, his eyes shining with a quiet determination, grasps the chief's hand in a firm handshake, the gesture speaking volumes without a word. "Mike," his voice infused with the grit of a seasoned fighter, "thank you, Chief. I just want people like him to know they can't get away with this kind of thing. People need to be held accountable, no matter who they are." As he speaks, Mike's words carry the weight of experience, the scars of a life spent fighting for respect and equality. The passage of weeks brings Craig face to face with the consequences of his actions. The courtroom, a starkly different arena from the parking lot of that fateful day, hums with the dispassionate energy of justice. Craig, now in a rumpled suit, his eyes downcast, stands before a stern judge. The charges against him are read, their gravity underscoring the weight of his misdeeds. Judge, his voice resounding throughout the courtroom. Mr. Craig, you are hereby charged with misconduct in office, destruction of property, and abuse of power. How do you plead? In the wake of the incident, Mike Tyson has emerged as a champion not only in the boxing ring, but in the fight for equality and justice. His newfound status as a hero has become a platform for change. At community events, town hall meetings, and local rallies, Mike's voice rings out, a clarion call for accountability and the dismantling of systemic racism. His words, seasoned with the wisdom of personal experience, are a beacon for those seeking to make a difference. Surrounded by a sea of adoring supporters, Mike Tyson basks in the warmth of their gratitude, his classic black convertible shining like a symbol of hope and triumph behind him. As fans approach, their faces glowing with admiration, Mike's signature grin spreads wide. He shakes hands, accepts words of praise, and poses for photos, the embodiment of strength and humility. One fan, his voice filled with reverence, "You're a hero, Mr. Tyson. Thank you for standing up for what's right." Amidst the crowd, Mike stands for a moment in quiet contemplation, his mind turning inward, a serene smile on his lips. Mike, his thoughts suffused with a quiet wisdom. Sometimes the best way to fight back is to let your actions speak louder than words. To stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. That's how you make a difference.